While most of us are at the checkout counter just kind of staring at the bill and complaining about how much groceries cost, there's a small group of people who aren't worried at all. In fact, they're actually getting wealthier. Why? Because they understand a really simple but hidden rule about money. And if you don't get why that $100 bill in your wallet feels like it's just melting away, you're losing a game you probably don't even realize you're playing. Okay, let's get into it.
We've all felt this, right? I mean, think back just 20 years. $100, that could get you a shopping cart that was overflowing, maybe even fill up the trunk of your car. Fast forward to today, and that same $100 barely fills a little handbasket. This isn't just a feeling you're having, and it's definitely not bad luck. What you're looking at right here is a massive shift in our economy, and this picture says it all.
And this is the absolute key. It's the mental flip you have to make. We're all taught to think, oh, prices are going up. But that's like looking at the problem through the wrong end of a telescope. The real and kind of sobering truth? The value of the dollar itself, that piece of paper in your wallet, is being systematically driven down. So the big question is, how on earth does that actually happen?
To really get our heads around this, we're going to strip away all the complicated stuff, all the Wall Street jargon. Let's just tell a simple story, a story that makes this whole thing crystal clear. Okay, so imagine a tiny little island economy. There are only two things here, 10 apples and 10 $1 bills. Super simple, right? Each apple costs exactly $1. But then the island's, let's call it the ape central bank, decides to fire up the printing press. It creates 10 brand new dollars out of thin air and just hands them out to everybody. Now here's where it gets interesting. There are still only 10 apples on the island, but now there are $20 all chasing after them. So what has to happen? Well, the price of a single apple has to double. It's now $2.
And that's the punchline. Right there. Nobody on that island actually got any richer. They didn't get more apples, the actual real stuff. They just got more paper. And the result? Every single dollar they had, the old ones and the new ones, was suddenly worth half as much. Their money was devalued.
All right, so that's a neat little story about an island, but what does it have to do with you? Working your job, trying to save up for the future? Well, this is where it really hits home.
So let's say you work hard all year long and you get a 3% raise. You feel pretty good about that, right? But if the real-world central bank is doing the same thing as our island bank, increasing the money supply, and that creates 7% inflation, you haven't actually gotten ahead at all. In fact, you've really taken a 4% pay cut. Your salary now buys you 4% less stuff than it did last year, even though the number on your paycheck is bigger.
And this is exactly why a lot of people call inflation a silent tax. It's a tax on your savings, on your salary, that you pay every single day, but it never, ever shows up on a tax form. It just quietly eats away at your wealth. You don't write a check for it, you just feel it every time you go to the store.
So if the system is kind of designed for your money to lose value, how is anyone getting ahead? Well, this brings us right back to that small group of people we mentioned at the start. They get it, and they use a very specific strategy to protect themselves and even grow their wealth. Let's see how that works.
Here it is. This is the big secret. It isn't about earning more and more cash just to let it sit there. It's about converting that cash into something else and doing it as fast as you can. The wealthy don't hoard dollars. They buy assets.
And this slide just perfectly lays out the two different ways of thinking. Over on the left, you've got the person who saves cash, and over time, inflation is like this slow leak in a tire. The buying power of that cash just melts away. But on the right, you have the person who holds assets, things like real estate, stocks, businesses, you name it. The prices of these things tend to go up with inflation, which protects your buying power and can even grow it.
Here's probably the best way to think about this. Imagine all your savings are a giant block of ice. If you just leave that money as cash in a savings account, you're basically leaving that block of ice out on the sidewalk on a hot summer day. What's going to happen? It is absolutely 100% guaranteed to melt. Assets, though, assets are the freezer. They're the thing you put the ice into to stop it from melting and maybe even to make that block of ice bigger over time.
So at the end of the day, it really all boils down to this one question. When you look at your own money, what do you see? Do you see a block of ice just sitting out in the sun, slowly disappearing every time you go to the grocery store? Or have you started building a freezer to protect it? Because understanding that difference, well, that's the first real step to building lasting wealth.